Welcome to I Heart Art. My name is Luci Callipari-Marcuzzo and I'm going to be working with homemade pigments today. So what is a homemade pigment? Well, that's anything that is found in your cupboard, your fridge, your freezer, even your garden. Sometimes you might find yourself, you're feeling inspired about something and you've only got pencil or graphite, or a fine liner, but you need a bit of colour, but you don't actually have the right colour or a colour at all at home in your art materials. So this is where the beauty of homemade pigments come in. So today I've got a small selection. I have turmeric that I have here in a jar. And I've added some water to that, so just to make a slurry. So that's a powdered turmeric. You can also use fresh turmeric if you have that at hand. I have instant coffee, or you can use espresso, percolated coffee, whatever your preference is. Added a little bit of water to the instant coffee. I also have some blueberries, frozen blueberries, because I couldn't get any fresh ones. So any, frozen, you just need to let them thaw out a little bit. So any kind of berry has quite a good pigment. So strawberries, raspberries, blueberries. And in this one I have beetroot. Beetroot is a really lovely rosy red natural pigment. However, be careful because beetroot stains. So if you get that on your clothing or your white floors or something, get to it pretty quickly. And I also have here some soy sauce and some black tea, just regular black tea with some, you can still see the tea bags in there. What else can you use? You can also use tomato sauce. If you're desperate for some red pigment, just reach into your fridge, even Vegemite. Yes, that is an excellent brown pigment. Cocoa powder, anything and anything can, create pigments. So I'm going to be drawing some bottles, these beautiful antique bottles that I picked up at a secondhand store. They're very well patinaed. They have lots of character. So I'm using them as inspiration for my the artwork today. And what I'm going to do is show you a simple way to create an artwork. So you might think, oh, no, I'm a crap drawer. Well, or I can't quite capture what it is that I want to do. So, but what you can do is take a photo of your objects that you would like to draw or create an artwork from, and use something like I'm using today, which is a tracing paper. This is a specialist type of tracing paper that has graphite. So basically grey lead pencil on one side of a wax bit of paper. You can also use any kind of transfer paper, or if that's not going to work, you might have a light box if you have that kind of kit at home in your studio or at home, or failing that, you can always hold your image up to the window. The old-fashioned holding the image up to the window and then pop your piece of paper over the top. But for today, I'm going to use this transfer paper because it's handy and it just allows me to get the shapes in really quickly. So I'll just start by drawing in these shapes. I have you need something with a reasonably sharp tip so that image will come through, and I'm just going to go trace around the outline. I've taken this photo on my on a bench, so I've got some tiles in there as well. I'm not sure how much detail because I'm just essentially getting in the shapes quickly to create the work. So just quickly adding that in. I'm just going around the shapes that I can see. So these bottles have a little screw top rim, or they did have, around the top of this one. There's a little smaller one that perhaps could have been an inkwell, I'm not sure. This other shapes, I've got a few different shapes here. I've got some circular shapes, some square shapes, just to add a bit of interest to what I'm working on, to the composition. So I have some tiles on the bench that I took this photo, and that'll just give a bit of interest to the work. Okay. So very faint outline to start me off. Next, I'm going to, what what colour will I start with? Perhaps I might start with the soy sauce. So I've got some brushes here. I've got a whole selection. Doesn't really matter what size you've got, but I suppose relative to the artwork that you're creating. So I'm going to start with the soy. Actually, I'm going to start with a pointy brush and just block in the shapes. The beauty of using the graphite tracing transfer paper is that it does tend to blend in. So if you're using a traditional transfer copy paper that you can get from the just a normal office supply shop, that's okay too. They're a bit darker, so you'll just have more of an outline, a stronger line. So the shapes are starting to appear with my soy sauce. And the next thing I'm going to do is just block in the bench, the tiles, just to give a bit of, like I said, a bit of interest so that they're not just floating in space on the page. Okay, so I've got just the basic shapes that my black and white printed photograph had. So just picked up on those shapes. Now that we've finished blocking in, we'll take a short break and I'll see you soon. Thing I'm going to start working with is the turmeric. Turmeric is an excellent golden yellow colour. The only thing with the homemade pigments is that the colours will eventually fade, or they may fade. The intensity isn't the same as purchased pigments. I suppose that's what you're paying for. And they're not as light fast, so eventually they will kind of fade off. But it is, it's a bit of fun. It's always fun to experiment with what you have at hand. So I'm just going to block in the little bottle at the front with yellow, with the turmeric, and you'll see it's a really lovely golden yellow. The turmeric also is a bit granular because it's a powder in powdered form. But if you had fresh turmeric and you had a juicer, you could experiment with using that as well. I have also used spinach. So if you've got a juicer at home, you can chuck some spinach or anything that's green and have a go at that. That's quite brilliant. Again, that will fade or oxidise. So once oxygen gets to some of these pigments, it will change as it dries. Okay, so this is looking a bit very yellow. So I'll just block that in and I can go back once that's dried a little bit. Okay, so the next one I'm going to try the beetroot. Brilliant beetroot. And try not to get all over myself at the same time. So I might do that, this one in the back here. So just adding in, and it's just really adding in some rosy pop of colour. So once you start blocking in different hues, you'll notice that they react differently to each other on the page. Some will recede and some will recede or go back on the page, on the paper, and some will come forward. The brighter or lighter colour will come forward and the darker colours will recede backwards into the page, onto your artwork. Okay, so I've blocked in this lovely rosy bottle, and again I will go back into that. Now I've just blocked that in. Next, what will I have a go at? I might try using the tea. The tea will just be quite a subtle tone. Very subtle, hardly noticeable. So the more tea bags you put in your hot water, the stronger the pigment, or don't put so much water in your cup or in your glass. So I've got the tea, which is quite a similar tone to the soy sauce. Now that I look at that. Okay, next one, let's try the blueberries. It's always fun to experiment. So interestingly, blueberries aren't very blue which you'll see. They're very similar in tone when you first squish them and put them on with a brush onto the paper as the beetroot. But you will notice something really interesting, and again, experimenting is really fun. It's like being a mad scientist in the art studio. What I'm noticing as I'm painting with the blueberries is that it's actually a purpley colour, so a bit more, blue like the blueberries. But as it dries, that colour will change again. The oxidisation will change it to like a blue-grey. And you don't necessarily need to also juice these pigments. If they're fresh, you can apply. People have used just to grab the strawberry out of the fridge and draw with it. It's happened. So you can experiment. The sky's the limit. Okay, so where I have put the soy sauce and tea, I'm now going to go back over and put in some details with my instant coffee that I've used. Now this may be, you may need to kind of get your intensity right, meaning you might need to add a bit more granular coffee to your mix. Or you might, even want to mix some of these pigments together to create, the colour that you want. There's no reason why you couldn't mix the turmeric with the beetroot or the blueberries or even the coffee to really experiment. So it's fun to discover what the pigments can do. Okay, so I'm just getting a little bit more detail in by adding, going back over the wash and getting a bit more detail. And trying not to drop things all over the floor at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to use the same thing, the coffee, and go back into the smaller shape, which you'll see in my hand. It's actually not yellow. I have used my imagination and I have changed that colour. So it's more of a clear glass that has patinaed with time. So I'm just having a look now at the lines and the shapes and the forms. And just going back into that to add a bit more interest in here. I'm going to keep working on this and we'll take a short break and I'll see you soon. Okay, so I'm just going to put that down and I'm going to block in the background with, I'm going to go back to the tea because I don't want the background to be too overpowering to the objects in my composition, in my homemade pigment drawing. So it's just a really subtle wash and really a stain, I suppose. With the same brush, I'm going to use soy sauce and go around the objects to add some shadow. Why would I not use black? Very good question for the shadows. Black can be very flat. So if you're using black to depict your shadows, it can be quite flat and a bit lifeless. But if you can use shades of grey, mix all your colours together and and create your own black. So, you know, something like this, the brown and the blueberries might make an interesting alternative to black. But that's great. So I am going to, I mentioned the blueberry. I'm going to go back into the blueberry because it's created, now that it's starting to dry, you can see that grey blue kind of purpley hue that I was talking about. I'm just going to pop some blueberry in here for a bit of shadow. And I'm really using my imagination about where the shadows might be and bringing the objects out by adding a bit of darkness behind them. We'll just bring them out from the page. Same idea. And adding a little bit of turmeric just to reflect, because colours will reflect off each other when they're sitting next to each other in a room. You know, sometimes the refraction of the light will reflect that as well. And I'm going to go back in and start adding some details. I have, this is a, it's called a Progresso stick. Basically, it's a solid piece of graphite or grey lead pencil. So you can just go back in, use your grey lead pencil, or you might have a pen, whatever you've got at home, you know, basically you can use to go back in. Or you might wait until the paper is a little bit more dry and then go back in with a finer brush to add more detail. But I'm just going to go back, I'm going to go in with this graphite, and it doesn't mind a bit of water. It's actually quite nice. So the paper that I'm using is a 300 GSM acid-free paper, but you can use anything really. The thicker the paper, so the 300 GSM, it's like a card. So the thinner paper that you have, if you are using a watery medium, it could buckle. So this is buckling a little bit, but once it dries, it should settle down quite a bit. You know, it doesn't have to be a graphite pencil, even if you've got, you know, coloured pencils, crayons, whatever you've got at home, it really doesn't matter. You can use anything to create artwork. Okay, so just putting in some more, you know, putting some detail back into the page. You don't have to do that. You might be happy for your work just to have no detail and just to block in washes. And that's okay as well. I am going to just trial and see whether I can get a little bit more detail back in with the blueberries, because I love them so much, because that colour has totally changed. So you'll see the grey blue, and then when I go back here now, you'll see the colour that will change. So just in there, I'm just going to do that just to darken that slightly. Well, hopefully it'll darken just that tone, and just by popping that over the top, because that was almost dry. And again, I'll just add around these objects as well. It's quite a lovely subtle tone once it's dried on the page. So hopefully you will be feeling inspired to have a look in your pantry, see what you've got. You can also use things like paprika, cayenne pepper, chili. However, I would use that with caution for obvious reasons. You don't want to be getting any chili in your eyes or on your hands. So you can really use anything, you know, balsamic vinegar even. You will, but what you'll be aware of is whatever you're using from out of your cupboard, your fridge, garden, has a smell. So if it smells, you know, while you're eating it, it'll smell on the page. That will eventually fade, but you know, vinegar is vinegar. So hopefully you'll have a bit of fun experimenting with homemade pigments. It is a lot of fun, and as I said, it's a bit of an experiment. It's like being a mad scientist in your art studio. So, or not even your art studio. Maybe you don't have an art studio. Maybe you're not an artist. Maybe you're just someone who likes to, you know, dabble and experiment try it out because it is fun, and you'll be surprised with what results you can get at the end, which you can kind of see here on the page. Hopefully you've enjoyed working with homemade pigments. Hopefully you're going to reach into your cupboard and grab out your turmeric or your soy sauce or your tomato sauce even, and create some artworks. It's been fun for me, and I'll see you next time.